In the world, there are, by last count, are a little more than 4,000 special economic zones. They're great. One more, one less won't make much of a difference, except for the few people who may benefit from the specific zone. What Honduras has just done, if it were a special economic zone, it really would not justify your time or the time of other people who are involved in the project. It's something that's quite different. It's a LEAP zone. It's a legal, economic, administrative, political jurisdiction, but it's also the reflection of a different concept of how a reform or the sorts of changes that people like all of you are interested in can be accomplished, perhaps with less conflict, perhaps more quickly. Let's talk about that. Honduras. Honduras is a country which has certain problems, and it's important to identify solutions that actually address the problems that are there. For example, it's a country with a high crime rate. Now, a tax-free zone means you have these very strange conversations. Someone comes and says to invest and say, listen, I'm thinking of where to put my plant in Central America, but I'm concerned about issues of crime, which is an issue in Central America, and the investment promotion minister says, but you won't have to pay any taxes. And the investor says, no, but I've been reading about killings and kidnappings. And they say, yeah, but it's duty-free. And at a certain point, es un diálogo entre los sordos. That is, at a certain point, you see there's no connection between the concern of the investor and the response of what this zone is about. Now, the challenge for Honduras to attract the investment it needs to escape from poverty is simply that the problems of poverty themselves associated with poverty make it difficult to attract the level of capital you need to escape from poverty. You could say it's a vicious circle. When you have high levels of poverty, it's associated with institutional weakness, political uncertainty, issues of transparency, of institutional credibility, in many cases with crime and insecurity. Under those circumstances, how do you attract substantial amounts of long-term investment? Honduras today has about $10 billion cumulatively of foreign direct investment. Singapore, 25 years ago, already had about $50 billion of accumulated foreign direct investment. So where does Honduras get the next $40 billion from just to catch up with where Singapore was 25 years ago? Now, this very simple matrix tells you a lot about investment promotion in the world today. One axis is about being business friendly. Turns out that if you start out poor and you're business friendly, you can grow at the speed of China. Now, China doesn't have rule of law, but it's business friendly. Now, you grow up to a certain point until you hit what we might call a middle income trap, where essentially you can't get past that in the absence of rule of law for a variety of reasons we can get into in questions. Now, if you don't have rule of law and you're not business friendly, you're called a basket case. You're a Zimbabwe situation. If you're both business friendly and have rule of law, then you're Hong Kong, then you're Singapore. Then you have economic levels that are superior to that of the main countries of the European Union. Any place in the world that has rule of law and is business friendly is very rich and very expensive. Now, you do have the case of being not business friendly, of being hostile to business, but having rule of law, which is an interesting case. That was Great Britain in the 1970s when it was called the sick man of Europe. It did everything it could to discourage entrepreneurship, enterprise, production, growth, and prosperity, but it had a highly credible judicial system with rule of law. And what you got was decline, decay, stagnation, but what you also could do is have a Thatcher recovery, because the fundamental foundation of rule of law was intact. Now, if what Honduras needs to address are the issues associated with poverty and familiar in Central America of institutional weakness, issues of credibility around institutions and rule of law, it's pretty clear that extends beyond just questions of economic policies. It's about legal institutions and economic policies. It's about administration, public or private administration, and it's the platform that all of that sits on, which is what is the political certainty, the political stability, what guarantees are there, what is the source of the credibility of governance. Now, there's a book some of you may have noticed by Richard Epstein called Design for Liberty. What's interesting is the subtitle. There are 3 things in the subtitle, and this was after the development of leap zones. I noticed the subtitle. Now, leap zones, that's 4 things. What are the 3 things in the subtitle? Private property. Well, we could say that's sort of like the E in leap zones. That's the economics. Public administration. Administration, that's the A in leap zones, administration. And rule of law. And the rule of law, well, that's the legal institutions. That's the L in leap zones. What's not there is the final P, the political dimension. In other words, these things have to come from somewhere and have to have some guarantor behind it. What is it that sustains those? Who is the guarantor? Who picks the judges? We want rule of law. Okay, someone has to pick the judges. The judges issue a ruling. Who's going to enforce and execute the judgment? There are policies. Who guarantees that those policies will be left up to? That's the political, that's the governance model. So that's the P. Now, in the case of the Honduran model, this is the reform that Honduras did to its constitution. This is the organic law, which in the case of Hong Kong would be the equivalent of the basic law. The political or governance model is a board of trustees. It's an international board of trustees of 21 members. There are 4 Hondurans, and the rest are from a variety of countries in a rough but not exact proportion to the sources of foreign investment that have arrived in Honduras, but it's not exact, but it's roughly with that. Now, the economic model is the one we're familiar with and that works and that we like. There's a statutory cap on tax rates. You can have spaces that are tax-free zones within the Honduran model, but the law establishes that there can't be taxes that exceed certain levels, and it permits a separate labor code from the national law, low regulation, duty-free, freedom of currency. It's a free market model. The legal institutions, this is not characteristically present in a special economic zone. You do have the case of the Dubai International Financial Center, where the Emir of Dubai understood that he was going to need to provide judicial credibility if he wanted the large amounts of money to arrive that an international financial center requires. Honduras put into its statute there would be Anglo-Saxon common law. Most important thing with law is it should be familiar, should be well known. Commerce and banking around the world operates within systems of law. Most, not all, but almost all of the major international financial centers use Anglo-Saxon common law. You can go to any major corporation in the world and they already have their draft contracts within that legal system. Their in-house counsel and their outside counsel works in that, manages litigation in that framework. It's the ability to say to an investor, do you know what you need to learn? Nothing. You already know it. The investor says, you mean I don't need to familiarize myself with the statutes of Belarus? I don't need to have Belarus law translated into English? I don't need to have my lawyers go through? Say, no, it's what you've been doing. You went to any of the major Western law schools and you studied British law or US law, you're already there. It saves a lot of time, a lot of credibility in that. The statute provides for mandatory arbitration. Keep it out of the courts, keep it simple. Do it at the speed of business, not at the speed of bureaucracy. It permits for international judges. Why would you want to make a major investment if the locals kind of have a closer relationship with the judicial power than perhaps you do? What if it's the cousin of the litigant opposite you who will be your judge? Ouch. No, it permits for foreign judges, international arbitration, so contracts can be enforced, property rights can be defended. The administrative model, it's a non-political administration. You're not going to have a local mayor coming to you saying, listen, I'm going to need some help for my re-election campaign. It's a mayor who is appointed by the governing board and can be removed by the governing board. It's an executive, but it's not a political executive, and it's subject to the Board of Trustees. Now, the political task is how do you provide stability and transparency, guarantees of rule of law, and the assurance that you're going to be meeting international standards. Honduras has done it with an international board of trustees. On top of that, Honduras negotiated and signed and ratified a bilateral treaty, in this case with Kuwait, though under the different most favored nation practices, those protections become generally available, which incorporates the Honduran law into an international treaty. So it makes it more resilient. It makes it something that exists not just inside Honduran statute, but exists outside. Those are leap zones: legal, economic, administrative, political jurisdictions. Is that a new idea? Not at all. Hong Kong is a leap zone. Hong Kong is not a special economic zone. Hong Kong is a legal, economic, administrative, political jurisdiction. To this day, with Hong Kong under the sovereignty of the People's Republic of China, which is governed by the Chinese Communist Party, at the appellate level of the Hong Kong courts, they have foreign judges to this day. If you're in a lawsuit in Hong Kong and it goes to appeal, the judge who hears your case may be a member of Great Britain's House of Lords, who's there in the family estate in Lancashire. That's Hong Kong. You go across the line into Shenzhen, that's a special economic zone. Those are going to be judges who are named by the Chinese Communist Party. They may be business friendly, because that's the mission at this time in that place. And if the party were to change the instructions, the judges would change in accordance with the instructions on the other side of the line. There's a reason why Hong Kong is 3 times richer than Shenzhen. Why doesn't it all just converge? Today, Shenzhen, the special economic zone, is actually more prosperous than Hong Kong was at the time of the handover. But Hong Kong just kept growing past that. Rule of law, it's always going to be ahead. Now, before doing this in Honduras, I spent 20 years helping countries in Latin America do economic reforms. And this was always the goal, to implement the complete model, and I actually developed a methodology of how you could get economic reforms approved, and it worked, and we were getting lots of reforms done. And at one point, after only having many successes, helping countries shoot up in the index of economic freedom, become investment grade, places like El Salvador that one year actually surpassed Chile in the index of economic freedom, using a methodology of how do you break through some of the political resistance to get economic reforms done, I said, let me think, what is it we're actually doing? And I said it out loud, what I'd been doing for 20 years, and what everyone does, and it was something like this picture. That we identify an individual reform, which is a very good reform, which will produce lots of benefits. So we're going to privatize the phone company. Then next year we'll privatize the pension company. I worked on both of those reforms in El Salvador. Maybe we'll dollarize. I worked on that one in El Salvador. Maybe we'll modernize and concession ports, privatize the financial system, a tax reform. These are all great things. And we'll do them, and you can get 1 or 2 of them done a year, and you roll through them. And it's your belief that we're going to do this for 20 years and accumulate these body parts, and then we will assemble them, and we'll get this. Now, does that seem likely when you say it out loud, that it'll kind of work out that way? Well, the experience has been that usually it doesn't turn out that way. What usually happens, and what was the light that went off for me about 15 years ago, is something always happens. You lose an election. There's an external economic shock. There's some consequences of the asymmetry or sequencing of certain reforms, where one reform anticipates a different one, and the absence of both of them at the same time creates issues. Or a president comes in who's corrupt or incompetent, or both. Things can happen. And the other thing I observed is, as you go through the reforms, you begin to accumulate enemies and opposition. And at a certain point, there's that critical mass, and they push back. So you get this pendulum effect. So then I said, well, actually, we know how to do this. We've always known how to do this. You start with that. That we know that if we start with that, we know what it will become. Now, what's interesting is everything is already there. Nothing is going to be added. It's not that each year you get a new body part. Now, you'll grow in size, and you'll mature, and there'll be increased complexity. But from the first moment, it's clear what you will have, because you start with everything. Implicitly, legal, economic, administrative, political factors are all together, but small. And that sets in motion an organic path to growth. Now, is that a theory, or is that something that's actually happened? Well, I think if you take a look around the world, we'll see, something like this seems to actually happen. But let's get to that in a moment. In that picture of the baby and all the pieces, you say, well, yeah, okay, but how do you get institutions there at the moment of birth? That's kind of hard. One clever observer said, in building institutions, the first 500 years are the hardest. And different countries are at different stages in that 500-year process. And maybe a presidential term is 4 years. That is, that there's a factor of coordination in time. So that's why you have 4,000 special economic zones, is you can change the tax code in a few months. But then if it's taking many, many years to evolve credible institutions, it's outside your term of government. You'll be dead by the time it's all finished, perhaps. Now, institutional leapfrogging is the solution that I identified for this. Issues of rule of law, judicial independence, transparency, credible governance, etc. What is institutional leapfrogging? Well, it's the exact opposite of technological leapfrogging. Technological leapfrogging is about what's new. Institutional leapfrogging is usually about what's old. So technological leapfrogging, a country has no phone system, has never had a phone system. You don't begin by putting copper wires on poles or underground. You don't retrace the evolution of telecommunications. You take whatever the newest thing is, if it's digital wireless, you just start with that. That's technological leapfrogging. So you can have a country that yesterday had no phone system, and today it has the most modern telecommunication system in the world, because it never had one before. Now, with institutions, it's kind of the opposite. What you want are institutions that are well proven. So Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore, when he took his country to independence in 1965, he used institutional leapfrogging. He was a British-trained lawyer, so he understood that low taxes was not going to be enough, that judicial credibility and property rights was going to be necessary. So he arranged with Great Britain that in essence, the Supreme Court of Great Britain, the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council in London, would be the Supreme Court of Singapore. So it would be British judges, people who are in no way influenced or controlled by Lee Kuan Yew. He had a reputation as a strong man, as a strong and dominant leader. So he, I think, especially understood, he was a brilliant visionary, that this would demonstrate that he had no control over the judges. He could actually have a conversation with an investor and say, it's not an issue where just trust me. There are 500 years of credibility in that courtroom in London. And they said, okay, here's the money we're investing. Hong Kong, when the handover took place from Britain back to China in 1997, it couldn't stay Hong Kong and get incorporated into the Chinese judiciary. So nor was it going to stay under the British court. So they created a new court that essentially was a clone of the old British courts with the British culture. And as I say, at the appellate level, it was the same people. Dubai, the Emir of Dubai, he learned from that. So then, 10 years ago, when he wanted to create an international financial center, he replicated, in essence, what Hong Kong at the handover had done. He said he created a new court and he hired very distinguished foreign judges from Great Britain, New Zealand, Malaysia, Anglo-Saxon common law, foreign judges. So is Honduras doing something that's an experiment? Well, it's one on which, depending on where you want to start counting, where there are 50, 40, 30, 12, or 10 years of successful results in other places. So at a certain point, maybe it's simply using what has proven that it works. The major international trade agreements, they all use foreign outside international arbitration. That is, it's not you sign a free trade agreement between Mexico and the United States, and is it going to be a Mexican judge or a US judge? Neither. It's going to be arbitration at the World Bank. That's institutional leapfrogging through outsourcing. It's also applied in some other activities, but we don't have time to go into all of that. The second thing about the Honduran zones and about leap zones is it turns out the amounts of land that you actually need are very small. They can be too small and too empty to fight for. The whole population of Greece could live in 1% of Greece at Hong Kong levels of prosperity. The whole population of Honduras could live in 1% of Honduras at Singapore levels of prosperity. It doesn't take much land. Paris, France, where 2 million people live, the city limits, that's 100 square kilometers. Tiny amounts of land are involved. I said I was going to say that this has sort of proved itself. Here's Helmut Kohl with Deng Xiaoping. Each one of them had the task of how do you migrate an economy from socialism to a market economy. For Helmut Kohl, it was the former East Germany. For Deng Xiaoping, it was the People's Republic of China. They each did it a different way. To this day, East Germany is a third poorer than the rest of Germany. It lives on subsidies and welfare. It's not the most dynamic place in Europe, nor is it the place of most opportunity in Germany. Deng Xiaoping began with 4 tiny special economic zones in the south of China, too small, too empty to fight over. And that became the most dynamic economic space in the world, and it rippled and permeated through the totality of China. Organic growth. This little matrix draws 2 comparisons. The one we always talk about is the direction of change from socialism to markets. So there was the movement towards socialism of Mao Zedong in China. There was the movement away from socialism towards markets of Helmut Kohl, but they both did it as a national unitary reform. In each case, there was someone saying, hey, I know it works, and I know I'm right, so we're just going to do it. Now, Kohl did it as a Democrat and a gentleman. Mao did it as an assassin and killed, I think, 5% of the population. But the underlying premise that if you know the right thing, you should apply it immediately in the whole country on top of everyone is common in both cases. Deng Xiaoping had been purged at least twice and understood that politics in China is a contact sport. He began with opt-in zones. He didn't say, we're going to do it Mao's way. He said, listen, everyone just keep doing what you're doing. I'm not going to bother you. We're just going to make these zones that are too small and too empty to fight over, that are far away from anything you value, and there's nothing in the zone that you understand to be an asset worth fighting over. So he could do it. And that transformed China. Now, there have been the attempts to create zones of socialism, kibbutz in Israel, the utopian socialists who no one even remembers. It turns out that when you have really bad ideas that are dysfunctional, but you do it as a voluntary opt-in zone, first, you don't really do any harm. And second of all, you kind of disappear in an inconsequential way. So there's the humility of working with zones is that if you're actually right, you can do a lot of good and won't have to fight over it. And if you're just wrong, you probably won't do much harm either. You think about what was accomplished in China. I mean, this was the Chinese Revolution. What legitimized it was its Marxist-Leninist ideology, its commitment to fight the capitalist enemy. That's what Deng Xiaoping faced. When we think about what each of us faces in our own countries, it's not that sort of resistance. If he identified a mechanism where he could overcome this and produce the fastest growing market economy for 30 years, there's probably something worth doing. Now, I worked with President Reagan. He did it the Helmut Kohl way, and I thought it was going to define the rest of my life. Has it happened that way? No, I think we need to learn different methods of change, not just ideas about the changes we desire. What happened to the class of 1980? Ronald Reagan? It didn't last. It's Obama today. China, Deng Xiaoping, continues to be a fast-growing, dynamic economy. There are some lessons in that. Whatever change it is you're looking to produce, there's probably an easy way and a hard way. It's worth thinking not just about what is the change that we seek, but what is the root of how we can actually get it done. Thank you very much. Sí, de hecho, estuvimos en Hong Kong hace pocos meses. El desafío para Hong Kong y para el pueblo de Hong Kong es real. Y están luchando precisamente en defensa de las características que en el matriz que mostré no es el asunto de business friendly, es la lucha del pueblo de Hong Kong, es en el eje de rule of law, administración de justicia. Por ejemplo, ha habido críticas que el último nombramiento del primer magistrado de la Corte Suprema mostraba un grado de influencias más allá de lo que ha habido históricamente de Beijing en el asunto. había temas sobre las leyes y procesos electorales, el campo de derechos políticos. Entonces, es un caso que demuestra precisamente cuán fundamental son esos elementos. La idea que puede complacer un pueblo con sola la prosperidad, la gente añora la libertad después que puede comer y vivir en forma decente, como todavía es el caso en Hong Kong. Pero en paralelo hay algo que no ha recibido mucha atención, que es bastante interesante, que dentro de la zona económica especial de Shenzhen están en un proceso muy al principio de crear una subzona nueva que tal vez por los indicios es siempre un poco críptico leer lo que están haciendo, tendrá características legales más parecido a los de Hong Kong. Entonces, hay algunos indicios también que dentro del mismo Partido Comunista están comprendiendo que para llegar a su próximo paso, la falta de un Estado de Derecho, de sistemas de institucionalidades legales es necesario. Ellos están haciendo juegos de palabras donde dicen rule by law, not rule of law. No sé cómo traducir efectivamente en castellano la diferencia, but the translation from Chinese to English is instead of the Communist Party saying rule of law, they're saying rule by law. Que quiere decir que el burócrata del Partido Comunista no puede ser tan arbitraria, tiene que el mismo burócrata del partido ser obediente a los dictámenes legales, que es un poco distinto que un Estado de Derecho pleno, que quiere decir que nadie está encima por la ley, que hay una objetividad. No llega a esa etapa, pero este es un proceso que está empezando. Pero la realidad es que hoy en día en China continental no hay un Estado de Derecho. O más bien no hay imperio de la ley.